Survival games continue to attract millions of players across hundreds of games, but it's been a minute since a huge breakout game captured the attention of the gaming world writ large. My name is Kodiak, this is Legacy Gaming, and today we're taking a look at the huge survival games that could define 2024. As always with games still in development, keep an open mind. Nowadays, release days are as flippant as they've ever been, and that means things could change at a moment's notice. Games on this list might or might not release within 2024, but all of them have signaled that this year is their goal, either to release in early access or a full-blown release. And with that in mind, let's jump into our first game, Enshrouded, which is an upcoming open-world co-op PvE survival game. We actually did a full breakdown of everything we know about this game already on the channel, so definitely check that out. But at the highest level, here's what you need to know. In Enshrouded, you awaken in the world of Embervale. With little in the way of instruction, your mission is to explore the world, level up your character, and lay down roots. The game puts a big focus on adventure and action, with players being able to wield weapons like swords, bows, and magical staves. With all the gear you can muster, you'll venture into the Shroud, dangerous zones that are only safe to explore for a limited period of time. But as expected, with great risk comes great reward, and players will be able to find some of the best loot deep within the Shroud. As you progress, you'll find NPCs, like the blacksmith. Freeing them will allow you to bring them back to your base, and provided you have shelter for them, they will join your company and provide you with new crafting recipes and additional benefits. If you're into survival crafting, then Enshrouded is definitely a game to watch. With up to 16 players co-op and seemingly no restriction on scale and scope, players can erect massive structures in this voxel-based world. Almost everything is destructible, which means terraforming and building whatever incredible structure comes to your mind. Enshrouded is a game we'll be diving into on day one, so if you like what you see, be sure to follow the channel for more videos very soon. Easily the most unique survival game on our list, Palworld is dropping into early access on January 19th. Think third-person shooter, but Pokemon, and you more or less understand the core tenets of the game. In all seriousness, it's a wild concept, and the team has certainly not been shy about showing off the action. Players will take their ranged weapons, bows, and guns into larger-than-life encounters, and then, with the help of their captured pals, take down hulking enemies. Like a good monster catcher game, you can level up your pals and then use them in conjunction with your gunplay to maximize the damage. If you'd prefer a quieter life, the game also promises gathering and crafting by means of farms and factories. That's right, there are no labor laws in Palworld, so if you've always longed to put magical creatures to work in abhorrent conditions, well, I guess you can do that. I will say we have been playing this game ahead of its early access release, and it is worth checking out our full video on our experience because you decide whether or not you want to purchase the game. I won't bury the lead here, we didn't really enjoy our time with it, but there's a lot we explain about the core gameplay systems that should help inform your decision. One thing to know about the game is that it's being developed by Pocket Pair, the Japanese developer also behind the game Craftopia. While it didn't enjoy massive success, the game featured a lot of the same ideas: action combat, gathering and crafting, exploration of various biomes, all the things you want in a survival game. There is a lot of crossover, including the use of assets from Craftopia into Palworld, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means you'll notice some similarities. By the time you watch this video, the game will most likely already be released into early access, so if you do check it out, let us know what you think in the comment section down below. We've been following the development of this next game, Nightingale, for quite some time. It's a PvE co-op survival game that takes place in an alternate Victorian era where players are scattered across various deadly realms. The goal, at least during the early access period, is to survive long enough to activate magical portals and return to the fabled city of Nightingale, where the developers promise the adventure truly begins. Along the way, you'll have to survive, and that's no easy feat in the realms of the Fae, where creatures of all shapes and sizes are waiting just out of sight. It's a classic survival game, so you'll spend a good bit of time collecting resources, building a base, all while pushing deeper into the world. The Victorian setting gives the game a certain look and feel that almost everything is themed around. From the clothes your player will wear to the buildings they can construct, the theme is ever present in the experience. One aspect of Nightingale we think is pretty unique is the introduction of something called realm cards, which gives the player a modicum of control over the realms that they visit. By crafting and combining realm cards, players can tap into the portal network and manipulate the worlds that they visit. Not only will this give players control over the look and feel of that world, but it'll allow them to dictate to a degree the flora, fauna, and natural resources they could potentially discover. I love this aspect of the game and really hope the developers deliver, because it's a system they could expand endlessly throughout early access and well beyond launch. The team has also said that quests will be at the center of the Nightingale experience, but not in the MMO sense. Realms will feature 1 or 2 larger set pieces, and those might include a boss fight or a linear style quest. It's unclear exactly how many of these the team has created ahead of the early access launch, but it's certainly something we'll be keeping an eye on. As I said before, Nightingale is a PvE co-op survival game, so don't expect to run off destroying other players' bases, but if you're jonesing to smack some trees and take on some truly grotesque creatures, then this game might be for you. If you're a fan of intense survival games where every night is a challenge, then you might be interested in this next game, Winter Survival. I'll admit, just reading about this game sets off my anxiety because it sounds like a truly hellish survival experience. But I get it, some of you are into that sort of thing. The game takes place in Mount Washington State Park, but what was supposed to be a nice hike turns into a fight for survival. You, mostly alone, will have to brave the winter elements as you're left stranded with next to no supplies in a hostile forest filled with wolves, traps, and bears. There is a brutal reality to this game that really leans into the survival elements of the genre. Winter Survival not only features hunger and thirst, but also temperature, physical and mental exhaustion, as well as the game's unique sanity system. If you think eating a few berries and taking a swig from a canteen will be enough to keep you alive in Winter Survival, think again. What I do find most interesting about the game is how long it looks to keep players on the back foot. In a lot of survival games, once you get up and running, the threats of the world become less of a big deal. But in Winter Survival, because things are guided by some light story elements in the early parts of the game, things are much slower. Honestly, I think players are going to really like that, but don't take my word for it. You can jump into the game's prologue right now if you want, completely free. Just head over to the Winter Survival Steam page and download the free demo. If you do check it out, let us know what you think. Leave a comment down below, because unlike a number of games on this list, Winter Survival has a clear-cut release date, so if you end up liking the experience, share your thoughts with the community. One game that recently popped up on my radar is Bellwright, a new medieval survival game where you're tasked with liberating the world from a tyrannical ruler, expanding your settlement, and becoming the hero of an oppressed people, turning to you when hope is lost. At its core, the game is something we've seen before, but there are a few unique elements that definitely intrigue me. For starters, players will need to liberate or convince nearby towns to join your cause. It's unclear exactly how you'll go about doing that, but a resource called Renown is at the center of your influence. Once you build up a small band of recruits, you can then assign them to be workers, soldiers, or guards. The game also features a work priority system, much like the one in RimWorld, which gives you control over the action of your community at a macro level. While much of the game is still a mystery, we have seen a bit about the building. Players will have access to a building menu and will be able to place down the blueprints to structures that they have unlocked. Then, so long as you have the required resources, you can add the resources to the structure in a semi-realistic interaction system. It does look a bit tedious, but the developers have said that your workers can also help with construction. Bellwright definitely looks like a game I could get behind, but I do want to warn you all that the developers behind this game, Donkey Crew, don't have the best track record. Their previous game, Last Oasis, was one you might have remembered us covering here on the channel, but their lack of communication throughout development and the unfortunate failure to support the game long-term was what caused its eventual collapse. Bellwright is a very different type of game, one that won't be bogged down with the need to balance complicated PvP systems, but still, given our experience with the team and that previous game, it's worth pointing out. As with all games, no matter what, I'm going in eyes wide open with a sense of cautious optimism. If you haven't heard of Once Human by now, you've most likely been living under a rock, because this game, in development by Starry Studio and backed by NetEase, is one that's taking the gaming world by storm. During the end of 2023, the game ran a massive open beta that eventually became a closed beta due to the high demand, and it's certainly shaping up to be an interesting survival game if it does release this year. There's no doubt about it, the game is weird, but that's kind of the point. You play as a sort of meta-human with strange powers you don't quite understand. The world itself has been corrupted by a mysterious energy called Stardust, which has transformed the world and everything in it. I would consider Once Human an MMO survival game because thousands of players can occupy the same map. There are distinct PvE and PvP zones, and if you have a few friends, you can even establish a hive, the name for guilds or clans within the game, build up a joint base, and create a central area of operation. You can even save your builds as blueprints, allowing you to quickly build them elsewhere once you've found something that truly works for you or your team. There are a lot of elements to this game, including gathering and crafting, utilizing a variety of tools and workstations, base building, which is definitely geared towards survival with power management and an array of defensive structures, and all of this is built around the game's third-person action, which might scratch that itch if you're a fan of games like DayZ but want more of an MMO experience. At the time of making this video, our team has been checking out the closed beta, and one thing that we can definitely say is the game is unique. It taps into a lot of elements from a whole host of other games in the genre, but attempts to add a unique twist on things by tapping into what they're calling the new weird theme. Strongholds provide the main leveling challenge and give you an opportunity to defeat enemies, solve puzzles, find hidden weapons and gear, and bring those resources back to your base, allowing you to unlock new blueprints and progress your entire game forward. Bosses, on the other hand, or Great Ones as they are called in the game, are difficult co-op or solo encounters that really put your current gear and progression to the test. These are hard progression choke points that open up new tiers of advancement once defeated. Like I said, there's a lot more to this game, and if you're not lucky enough to get into the closed beta, there is a ton of gameplay out there to check out. It could be huge. Livid certainly thinks so, and with the team eyeing a Q3 release, it's definitely a game we'll be keeping a close eye on. There are a lot of post-apocalyptic survival games out there. The genre was quite literally made famous off that premise, so it's always interesting to see new games trying to refine what many consider to be the classic survival formula. Rooted is one such game. Development of the game was made possible thanks to Kickstarter, which raised over 120,000 euros, smashing its 60,000 euro goal. The game itself is set around the year 2100, after a biological weapon brought civilization crumbling down. Your task, as is the case with most survival games, is scavenging and crafting your way back up to stability. I'll be honest, there's not a whole lot we've seen of this game outside of a few developer video blogs that show off various aspects of the game's exploration. But the Kickstarter page has a rather expansive roadmap, which includes development of solo and co-op play, advanced building, which includes new mechanical and electrical workstations, advanced energy systems so players can store and produce their own energy, advanced multiplayer modes, not entirely sure what that means, big cities and new points of interest to explore, and the list goes on. It's ambitious, and while there's really nothing wrong with that, the game is just hitting its closed alpha, which means there's still a ways off from an official release. That being said, the team is still eyeing some sort of broader 2024 release. The system I'm most interested in revolves around blueprints. The ambition is for players that create awesome structures and layouts to be able to capture that entire build in a blueprint and then share it with the broader Rooted community. Honestly, that's pretty cool and gives less creative players more access to some awesome builds. Like much of the game, we'll have to wait and see if the systems will work as intended, but Rooted certainly has some promise, it just needs some more time in the oven. Everything we've talked about so far is cool, but these games are missing one major thing: dinosaurs. No, I'm not talking about Ark 2, which you could absolutely include in this list of games, but let's be real, everyone knows about that game, and with Ark Survival Ascended being an all-hands-on-deck situation currently, it's unlikely we'll see Ark 2 this year. No, the game I'm actually talking about is The Lost Wild. This is a single-player survival horror game being developed by a studio called Great Ape Games. In The Lost Wild, you play as Saskia, an experienced investigative reporter that finds themselves stranded and alone in the aftermath of a mysterious temporal event. The core gameplay is about stealth, distraction, and survival, so if you expect to hunt and tame dinosaurs, think again, that's a different game. I actually applaud this approach because I think it will make for a much more visceral game experience, almost Jurassic Park-like. One single human can't possibly hope to defeat a T-Rex, but they certainly can outsmart it, distract, and disorient it. The game puts humans at the center of the food chain, and while we don't have gameplay to confirm this quite yet, my guess is there will be some elements of hunting and gathering that will keep us sustained throughout the 6 to 10 hour promised single-player story. To be clear, The Lost Wild is not a massive open-world survival game in a persistent world. This is a story-driven experience where the player is entirely dependent on their skills and the guidance of a mysterious voice over a radio. If I wasn't such a huge chicken, this game would be right up my alley because I love the premise, but I do want to caution that the development team has been very quiet over the last few years. I'm not saying the game isn't real or anything like that, but it might not be as close to launch as we hope. Still, it's certainly worth keeping an eye on. If you're looking for a game that puts player versus player action at the center of the survival experience, then look no further than Renown, a game that seemingly combines the melee combat of Mordhau with the survival gameplay loop of Rust. That's it, that's pretty much the game. In all seriousness though, this medieval survival game drops you into the world with nothing and gives you the freedom to explore and play the way that you want. Let's not parse words. At its core is PvP action, so if you play games like Rust and they are not your thing, then you will not enjoy this game. Honestly, I believe the genre needs games like this to keep it alive. The inclusion of something like basic voice comms definitely opens up the game for some moderation issues, but it also gives the community a way to connect that is so vital to the health of these types of games. What's cool about Renown is the theme, which is purely based on medieval technology. There are no guns or hovercraft, just swords, shields, bows, and axes, and oh yeah, the occasional siege weapon we all know as the trebuchet. If you do manage to survive long enough to build up a small castle, you can create all manner of siege weapons like catapults, battering rams, and lay waste to your mortal enemies, but as with all PvP survival games, that's only if you can survive. The game currently doesn't have a release date, but they do have a really interesting Trello board that's updated with their development roadmap. It's a great way to see everything the team has planned, as well as what major systems are already developed, so it's worth a look if Renown is a game you think you should check out. Last up on our list today is a game by 11-bit studios called The Altars. You might remember the reveal trailer, which featured clones of a man named Jan, but up until recently, we didn't know anything about the actual gameplay. What we know now, thanks to a recently released trailer, is that Jan, I guess the original one, is stuck on a strange and lonely planet. In order to fix his ship and return home, he must create clones of himself called altars that have a diverse set of skills and abilities. The gameplay trailer revealed two distinct types of gameplay. Now I'm speculating here, but this side view perspective looks very similar to other base management style games where you'll move throughout the halls of your ship, checking in on various rooms and systems in order to keep progression moving forward. On the flip side, we got a look at the third-person exploration, which I have to say looks cool, even if it was just a couple of frames. Truly, this game is last on the list because it's the one we know the least about, but I'm certainly intrigued. And as you know from my coverage of other games involving 11-bit, I am a huge fan of the games this team develops. They're also set to release Frostpunk 2 within the first half of 2024, so this could be a big 1-2 survival punch. I don't know if it's fair to call The Altars a true survival game just yet, but it's certainly a game we're keeping on our radar. I think it's safe to say the survival genre has a bright future. Games like Enshrouded and Nightingale look to cement the early part of 2024 with real, tangible games people can pick up and play. And as the year rolls on, I have no doubt some of the other games we talked about and probably new survival games will start to materialize. Now, there is one huge survival game we left off the list, a game we've been covering here on the channel for well over a year now, V Rising. It's an incredible early access vampire-themed survival game with epic PvE and truly nail-biting PvP, so check out our entire lineup of videos covering that game if you're interested. The 1.0 release is tentatively scheduled for Q2 2024, so you'd best be ready. My name is Kodiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.